Stage, Mr. Rob Pickering.
Well, what an introduction. Thanks, Matt. I'm not sure that I deserve that much of a build-up, and I'm sure it can only be a disappointment from here on in, but I'll do my absolute best to keep it as high level as possible. What I really want to talk about today, after I've introduced myself, is not only what the NBN is in real practical terms, but how you can use the NBN to do better business, to be better at what you do, to facilitate better communication with your customers. So that's what I'm here for today to talk about. So as Matt alluded to earlier, I actually am a country boy. I'm not just from Albury, I'm actually from outside of Albury. So where I went to school had about 15 people in the school. I lived about a solid 25-minute drive from Albury. So I'm very, very intimately familiar with the challenges that not just regional locations face, but rural locations as well. So the NBN is something that is near and dear to my heart, in that I see the way that the NBN is being rolled out will deeply affect the lives of rural and regional Australians for the better. So a bit about my history so you can know where I've come from. I guess that I previously was an IT director for a large multinational company. I was based in Beijing for 3 years. And before that, I did work in Albury for about 7 or 8 years. So I've got both a wide local and international experience. Currently, I'm the Director of Consulting for Anatel. That sounds like a really fancy job title. I know, I made it up myself. But the reason that I am in that role is actually what I'm passionate about is out talking to customers about technology, how they can do better business through technology, and I kind of couldn't think of a better title, so that's where I'm going from there. I'm really excited to be here in Dubbo to evangelise about the NBN, to talk a bit about it. We've got a reasonably large operation here in Dubbo, and I've certainly spent a lot of time here over the last 3 years that I've been at Anatel. So it's somewhere that I'm both familiar with and interested in continuing to stick around and do things at. So hopefully if I do a good job here, I'll get invited back for a second time. So I want to touch a little bit on what the NBN actually is. I think that there's probably been a few people talk about it, but I want to talk at a very high level about what it is and what you can do with it. The NBN is a world-class data network delivered using a suite of technologies directly to your premises. I think everyone's got that, it's on all the news everywhere. That's just a high level of what it is. It's very high speed. So initially it's up to sort of 100 megabits a second, and then up to a gigabit without too much work on anyone's behalf, and even in the future up to 10 gigabits a second, which is the sort of technology speeds that we can't think that we would use today. But the reality is that the NBN is a sort of investment that we will use for the next 100 years. So it needs to be capable and able of scaling out in that way. It's highly available and resilient. So it's very available. It has the sort of uptime that we don't characterise with things like copper-based networks like ADSL or ISDN. It's sort of always available, always on. And it really has the level of resiliency that you need to bank your business on. Because more and more as your businesses grow and you use more technology, your ability to access the technology infrastructure will become the limiting factor. If you don't have that access, you will struggle to compete with people that do. So, what's been rolled out today? So you've got consumer plans being delivered today. So consumer plans are out in the marketplace today, and you can buy them if you're in an NBN-enabled area. And the difference between consumer plans and business plans, which will be rolled out in the next sort of 3 months, the business plans will be synchronous in nature. Now, by that I mean the current consumer plans are, say, 100 megabits down and 40 megabits up. The business plans will be 100 megabits down and 100 megabits up, or a mixture of those sort of plans. So you're starting to see the synchronous nature of what fibre technology can deliver to you. And that's really where the businesses that we see will leverage those synchronous needs to deliver some of the things I'm going to talk about today. I guess very, very simply, there's a couple of different ways that the NBN will be delivered. You've got the fibre technology, which I think we're all hoping for in some ways, certainly is the best that you can get. That's the sort of the first way that it can be delivered, and that will go to about 93% of all Australia. So delivered using fibre, I won't talk to you a lot about what fibre is, but basically it is a digital medium, which means it is either on or off. So it doesn't degrade like copper. It hasn't got the same sort of problems that copper has with, if there's a strong rain or a flood. there could be water in a copper line, for instance. That does not happen with a fibre optic connection, so it is highly available. We've got wireless, so fixed wireless, or what you guys would call LTE, which is the sort of the technology name, or what the Telstra uses their 4G network. So there's a mixture of that where that will be delivered in places that fibre does not make sense for cost or population reasons, but there will be a number of places where that will be delivered. And that's sort of looking to that 12 megabits up to 24 megabits a second. And the last kind of technology where it will be delivered, at least in the interim until the LTE network is rolled out, is via the satellite network. So that will give everyone in Australia, more or less everyone in Australia, access to the type of broadband they can't get today. And on that basis, it's satellite being a last resort. It will only be used where LTE or fibre isn't practical, but it is still significantly better than what businesses can get today and consumers can get today in those areas now. Why do I see the NBN as being important? What is the driving factors behind the implementation of the NBN? First of all, I see it as a nation-building exercise, the likes of which we have not seen since the Snowy Mountain scheme, the Hume Highway build-outs. It is a sort of infrastructure project that governments undertake once in a generation. It very much depends on facilitating the way of life for the next 30 or 50 years. So it's an investment not just for today, but for the next 50 years. And so keeping a very close eye on that means that we have got a broadband network with the NBN that will rival the best in the world. There are other countries that have rolled it out, and those other countries that have rolled it out have done it on a much smaller scale. So somewhere like South Korea has rolled it out. South Korea is barely larger than New South Wales. So on that basis, taking a massive nation-building investment like this is something that is a huge leap of faith and foresight on behalf of the government, and really means that in the future we will be able to compete not just nationally, but internationally. So why throw out the copper network? I've had a couple of questions about that when I'm around talking to people. What's wrong with the current copper network? Well, the current copper network is kind of breaking. The copper network that it was put in has been about 50 years old, and it's done a great job for the last 50 years. But I don't know if you can see there, it's kind of getting old. So we're in a situation where we either choose as a nation to invest in the next generation of technologies, or we stick with what we've got now and continue to maintain and facilitate that copper network, quite possibly at a greater cost than delivering the NBN network. So again, it's not just a measure of building a nation, but it's also a measure of replacing infrastructure that needs to be replaced with infrastructure that will grow and scale and allow us to do business better in the future. Given that, I guess, not much more than, well, let's say 10 years ago, 56 kilobits was the absolute fastest that you could get. That was absolutely blazing. I actually remember getting my first 56 kilobit modem. It was amazing. It was a white US robotics modem. It cost about $450. And when you plugged it in, you accessed the internet. I was like, wow, this is 50% faster than my old 33 kilobits per second modem. That was a sort of technology increase that at the time we thought was amazing. What we've got now is that we have reached the capacity of the copper network. So we've not just gone from 56 kilobits, we jumped from 56 kilobits to ADSL1, which was up to 8 megabits, to ADSL2, which was up to 24 megabits. But both of those speeds were only theoretical maximums. You only got 8 megabits if you were right next to the exchange, and you only got 24 megabits if you were right next to the exchange. So what we're seeing now is people are paying a lot of money for copper-based infrastructure. If you wanted to get a 10 megabit connection in the main street of Dubbo, that's quite possibly $800 or $900 a month, or potentially more, depending on where you are. So with the sort of bandwidth that we see in use in the future, that 100 megabit at an attractive price point means that businesses can get better connectivity for less than what they're paying for today. So if we have a quick look at that graph provided by our friends at IINet there, I know it's a little bit cut off. The time it takes to deliver certain technologies over older internet connectivity is dramatically increased. And when you go to the NBN, you're getting this sort of on-demand experience that people are demanding for nowadays, for them delivering things like entertainment into their home, to deliver things like some of the things I'm going to talk about in a minute. It is really something that we might not use right today because we're comfortable with the 20 megabits that we've got. But I dare say that 10 years ago, when I got my first 56 kilobit modem, I also thought I'd never need more bandwidth than that. And I'm pretty sure I maxed that out pretty quickly. So it's something that, while we might think we've got sufficient bandwidth today, the reality is that we'll get better bandwidth at the same price point that is scalable out to the bandwidth that we'll need for the future. Ooh, back out to me. But on that basis, I know that a lot of this investment has been taken in rural and regional areas first. That's something I'm very grateful to the government for. Certainly when I'm around talking to my customers that are in rural and regional areas, they find the NBN as something that they are very much looking forward to. The sort of things that potentially the customers that I deal with in the city areas don't understand because they're already getting potentially sufficient bandwidth. To give you an example, for that same person that I talked about before on the Dubbo Main Street that could get 10 megabit synchronous connection for $800 a month, that same connection in the Sydney CBD might be $350 a month. So you're actually paying more than twice what your metropolitan cousins are paying for the same sort of bandwidth. So I am very grateful that the government has chosen to prioritise rural areas, really where that bandwidth at an affordable price point is not available at the moment. So on that basis, I've talked a little bit about the NBN, and look, that's great, but what are the business drivers? What can we do with the NBN that you couldn't do before with your old copper-based network? What will make you money out of the NBN? And that's what I'm here today to talk about. So I've just framed up a little bit about what the NBN is to give some texture to the discussion I'm going to have about what are the business drivers. Why would you get an NBN connection? Because it's great for home. For instance, if you want to download movies, watch TV on demand, browse the internet blazingly fast, watch cat videos on YouTube, that's all an amazing use of the technology. But does it really make you more money? Does it make your lifestyle that much better? Unless you're really attached to cat videos on YouTube, I'd suggest that it doesn't. But what we see here is that high-speed symmetrical bandwidth at an affordable price point enables technology like remote working. So I've got a picture up there of a guy who's remote working. Now, if I was him, I certainly wouldn't be on my computer on the beach, but some people like to do that. I know my wife heavily despises me working from home, but if it saves on the commute time, or it saves on my ability just to open up an email and reply back to it, or access an application that I couldn't access previously from home, it means that I'm able to spend more quality time rather than less quality time. I think that one of the huge things that I see as being a big problem for customers is multiple site offices. So I don't know how many people in this auditorium have more than one office at their workplace. But generally, your infrastructure will be at one location, and you'll have remote offices around the locations, around the